The stars in the sky were quiet that day. The space around the colony station was calm. Nothing seemed wrong at first. The people on station Halora 7 lived their days like usual. They grew food in small glass farms. They fixed their machines. They played music and told stories from Earth. It was a place far away from danger, or so they thought. But high above them, deep in the dark of space, something was coming. The ships had no names, they had no lights. They were shaped like knives, sharp and silent. They belonged to the Zark Empire, rulers of over 100 star systems. The Zark were tall, cold, and cruel. They did not smile. They did not cry. And most of all, they did not forgive. The Zark believed that humans were weak. They saw humans as nothing but noise and trouble. For years, the Zark watched Earth from afar. They saw how humans built, explored, and reached farther into the stars. At first, they ignored it. But when humans started landing near the Zark's border, the Empire decided it was time to send a message. They did not send a letter. They did not ask for a meeting. Instead, they sent 10 ships. Each one was quiet and black like the night. Each one carried soldiers with silver eyes and steel claws. The soldiers had one job: take 10 humans from the colony and bring them back to the Empire. No talking, no warning, just take them. At sunrise, the sky over Station Halora 7 turned red. People thought it was just the sun rising over the gas clouds. They had no idea it was fire reflecting off Zark metal. In minutes, the black ships landed on the edge of the colony. The doors opened and the soldiers marched out. They walked in lines. They did not run. They did not speak. People screamed and ran. Some tried to hide in homes. Others locked their doors, but it did not matter. The Zark soldiers scanned every building, every face. In less than 1 hour, they found the 10 they wanted. They were all different, young and old, quiet and loud, workers and students. None of them had done anything wrong. They were chosen because they were human. That was all the reason the Zark needed. The 10 were dragged into a dark metal room. The walls were gray and cold. The floor was smooth like glass. There were no windows, no chairs, no guards, just silence. One by one, the 10 stood in the center. No names were asked. No charges were given. A red light flashed above them, and in that moment their lives were taken. The room stayed quiet. The soldiers left. The bodies were not returned. The colony was warned not to speak of it. And then the black ships flew away as fast as they came. The sky turned blue again. The stars blinked like nothing had ever happened. But everything had changed. News of the 10 did not reach the galaxy right away. The Zark made sure of that. They blocked signals. They erased files. They threatened anyone who asked questions. To them, this was simple. A small lesson. A quiet punishment. No one would care about 10 humans from a faraway place. But they were wrong. One boy had been taken from his mother, who worked for the Space Council. One girl was the niece of a famous pilot. Another was a friend of a well-known engineer. These 10 were not famous, but they were connected. And when people noticed they were gone, they asked why. When they got no answers, they searched harder. And somewhere deep in Earth's network, someone found a piece of video. Just a few seconds, but enough. A blurry clip showed a black ship landing. It showed shadows dragging a human. The face could not be seen, but the fear in their body was clear. That small video spread like fire. People cried, people screamed. On every space station in every city, humans asked the same question. Who were the 10? Where did they go? Why were they taken? At first, the Zark said nothing. Then they said the clip was fake. Then they said the 10 were spies, but none of it made sense. There was no proof, no reason, just silence. And silence in the face of pain grows into anger. The families of the 10 lit candles in their homes. In spaceports and domes, humans held signs that said, "Bring them back." They painted stars on walls and sent messages into space. The names of the 10 were whispered like prayers. But still, there was no answer. 1 week later, a Zark leader made a speech. It was cold and short. He said the 10 humans had been removed for safety. He said the Empire had full right to act. He said Earth should be quiet if it wished for peace. That speech made it worse. People stopped hopping. They started planning. The leaders of Earth met behind closed doors. The children of the 10 promised they would never forget. Friends began to dig through old records looking for any clue, and hackers reached into systems the Zark thought were safe. All across the galaxy, humans who had once stayed quiet began to speak, and those who had once watched with fear began to act. The Zark had made a mistake. They did not just take 10 lives, they touched the hearts of billions. And Earth was no longer sleeping. In deep oceans, in high towers, in icy moons, humans prepared, not for war, not for peace, but for truth. The Zark had tried to erase 10 souls, but now those 10 were stars in the minds of many. The Zark believed they had sent a message, but they did not understand the hearts of humans. You can burn their homes, you can break their machines, but you cannot erase the love people feel for those they lose. You cannot erase memory, you cannot erase fire. And now Earth would send its own message. It would not be loud, it would not be quick, but it would be remembered forever. The 10 people taken by the Zark Empire were not famous across the galaxy. They were not leaders or soldiers. They did not wear medals or speak to crowds, but they were important, very important, not because of power or rank, but because of the people who loved them. One of the 10 was named Elsa Rowe, a quiet girl who worked in the station's garden room. She liked to grow plants and write poems in her notebook. She did not fight or shout. She only wanted peace and beauty. But Elsa was more than a gardener. She was the little sister of Captain Linus Rowe, a well-known commander of Earth's defense fleet. He had saved hundreds of lives during the Battle of Red Orbit. He was strong, brave, and deeply loved his sister. When he heard Elsa was gone, something inside him broke. Another taken was Marcus Sion, a young engineer who fixed power lines on Halora 7. He loved machines and could repair almost anything with just a small tool and his clever mind. But Marcus was not alone. He had a partner named Luma, a woman known as one of Earth's best system coders. She helped build the defense walls that protected entire stations. When she heard about Marcus, she didn't cry. She opened her screen and began typing. Quietly, quickly, with a purpose. She knew the Zark had made a terrible mistake. There was also Tomas Gray, an older man who worked at the spaceport's cargo hold. He moved boxes, lifted crates, and helped travelers. Everyone liked him because he always smiled and told funny stories. But Tomas had once been married to Admiral Helena Gray, a retired war hero who still advised Earth's top security team. Though they had gone separate ways, she still cared for him deeply. When she saw his name on the missing list, she stood up from her chair and went straight to the council room. Lena Voss was a school teacher. She taught children how to read and how to speak many languages. She had lived on the colony for 6 years and was known for wearing bright scarves and bringing sweets to her class. The students adored her. But Lena had a secret. Her best friend was Dr. Yaron Voss, the head of Earth's Language and Signals Department. He studied alien codes and led quiet missions to stop wars before they started. When Lena vanished, he didn't rest. He called old friends, even in forbidden zones. He asked for help from people who owed him, and they all answered. Renzo Hart was a cook. He made noodles, rice dishes, and special desserts from old Earth recipes. Many people came to his kitchen just to talk to him. But Renzo wasn't just a chef. He was also the nephew of Myra Hart, who served on the Space Trading Board. She had close ties with many alien markets. When she learned Renzo was missing, she made calls, sent files, and shut down every trade route the Zark used. She didn't wait for Earth's approval. She acted with the fire of someone who had lost too much. Then there was Cass Nova, a music student. She played a small silver flute and recorded soft songs in the quiet halls of Halora 7. She had dreams of playing on Earth's big stage. But Cass was the daughter of General Aaron Nova, the man who once stopped a war by talking instead of firing. He was known for peace, but when he saw Cass's name, something in him changed. He didn't want peace anymore. He wanted justice. Nira Bell worked in the dome's night tower, helping ships land safely. Her voice was calm and her eyes were sharp. Her job was to guide pilots and keep them safe. But she was more than just a watchwoman. Nira had a bond with Evan Bell, her twin brother who had gone missing 3 years earlier during a Zark mission. When she disappeared, Evan, thought to be dead, suddenly returned to Earth. He had been alive, hiding from the Zark, and now he had a reason to rise again. Juno Wren was only 16. She loved stars and wanted to become a star mapper. She lived with her grandmother and sent voice messages to her friends every night. She was full of hope. She never thought she was important. But Juno was a cousin to Talos Wren, the scientist who helped create Earth's fastest ship, the Orion 12. He didn't speak much. He didn't cry. But when he learned Juno was taken, he locked himself in his lab and began to build something new, something secret. Bren Luthar was a poet who sang in the colony square. He told stories about Earth, about kindness, and about rising after a fall. His words made people smile and remember who they were. But Bren had once been in love with Dr. Kira Luthar, a powerful voice in the Galactic Healing Council. She had healed the sick, the weak, and the broken. But this pain was too deep. She stood before the council and said, "You heal with words, but now I speak with silence. I am going to fix what they broke." And finally, there was Vayan Reese, a boy who had no family on the colony. He worked quietly in the air system and had few friends. But Vayan had once been saved by a man named Theo Reese, who raised him like a son. Theo was not known to the public, but behind locked doors, Theo worked in the shadows, helping Earth's deep security missions. He taught spies how to hide and how to strike. When Vayan vanished, Theo broke all his rules. He stepped out of the dark. And he began to plan something the Zark could not stop. These 10 humans were not just 10 names. They were 10 lights, each tied to many others. They were strings in a great web woven across space. The Zark had thought they were nothing, but they were everything to someone. Their loss lit a fire in the hearts of millions. People who had never met the 10 now whispered their names. Pictures were drawn, stories were told, music was written for them. Across ships, domes, and stars, humans remembered. And with memory came action. The friends and family of the 10 did not scream. They did not throw stones. They moved like water, quiet, steady, and strong. Some hacked into enemy codes. Others shut down travel paths. Some met in dark rooms and shared maps. Others spoke to aliens who still believed in peace. Bit by bit, the world began to shift. The Zark had taken 10 people. But in doing so, they awakened thousands. Every person who loved one of the 10 now stood up. Every person who had once felt powerless now had a reason. The pain was heavy, but the love was heavier. And that love turned into something else. Something the Zark could never measure. Something the Empire could never crush. The 10 were gone, but their names lived on. They were not just victims, they were sparks. And the fire was only beginning to grow. Something had changed across the stars. No one could see it at first, but it was there. It moved slowly, quietly, like wind before a storm. The 10 humans were gone, but their names stayed in people's hearts. And those hearts had begun to burn, not with fear, but with quiet revenge. Earth did not send ships. It did not shout or declare war. The people who cared the most started small. A signal station in the Edge Zone shut down one night. No one knew why. The Zark blamed broken wires, but their technicians could not fix it. The station stayed dark. A week later, a cargo ship vanished. It was flying through a calm zone with no storms and no pirates. It sent a message, just 2 words before it was gone, too late. That ship was never found. The Zark said it must have exploded. But the wreck was never seen. It was as if the ship had been taken by the stars themselves. Then another thing happened. A supply route used by the Zark for trade suddenly stopped working. Their money shipments vanished. The space gates they used every day started glitching. Sometimes they would open but only show black screens. Other times they would work but send ships to the wrong place. Traders grew afraid. They stopped using those gates. The Zark lost control over the flow of goods. Still, no one knew who was doing it. There were no signs, no explosions, no clear enemy. The Zark officers laughed at first. Just accidents, they said, just weather. But some of them started to worry. 1 or 2 asked for stronger guards. One commander even called it a bad feeling. His warning was ignored. But the small events continued. A Zark drone base stopped sending reports. When another team went to check, they found the base empty. No bodies, no blood, just a single word carved into the floor: remember. The Zark thought it was strange. But still, they said nothing in public. Across the stars, people began to whisper. They had heard about the 10. They knew Earth had not forgotten. They saw the missing ships, the broken lines, the odd reports. Some smiled. Others stayed silent. But deep inside, many felt hope. Hope that someone was doing something. Hope that the 10 had not been taken in vain. In one system, a Zark listening post caught a signal it didn't understand. The message was short. She sang to the stars, "You silenced her. Now we echo louder." That post was destroyed the next day by its own power system, an overload the Zark claimed. But the engineers said that was impossible. Something or someone had rewired it without being seen. The small revenge moved like a ghost. No one knew where it would strike next. No one knew who was behind it. But patterns began to form. All the hits were linked to the Zark, and all of them had something in common. They were near places connected to the 10 who had been taken. One of the places was a fuel stop built by Marcus Sion before he disappeared. The next was a data tower Lena Voss had helped teach children in. Then it was a mining belt where Thomas Gray used to work. The targets were not chosen by chance. They were pieces of memory, small places filled with meaning. Someone was planning each move. Someone was watching. And slowly, fear began to creep into the Zark halls. Some of the Zark leaders told their people to stay calm. They said it was just a few bad days, but the soldiers weren't so sure. They had friends on the missing ships. They had worked on the dead bases. They had seen the signs scratched into the walls, names, words, songs, human messages, human warnings. The Zark had always thought humans were weak because they felt too much, because they cared too deeply. But now, they were beginning to see the truth. Feelings can be fire, and that fire was spreading. On Earth, the people behind the revenge did not speak to the press. They worked in shadows, in labs, on ships, in empty halls beneath cities. They were not working for glory. They were not looking for medals. They only wanted one thing: balance. They could not bring the 10 back, but they could make sure the Zark never forgot them. They could make the galaxy see that humans were not soft, that Earth would not bow. A silent group began to form. Some called them the Watchers. Others called them the Silent 10. No one knew their real names, but their actions spoke loudly. They never used weapons unless they had to. They never hurt civilians. They did not take over planets or start battles. Instead, they took tools, opened doors, and closed others. They shut down what the Zark used to feel strong. And in doing so, they made the Empire feel weak. In one Zark city, all the lights turned blue one night. The screens showed pictures of flowers. Then words appeared. For Elsa Rowe, she loved sunflowers. No one knew how the images got there. Security was tight. Systems were locked, but someone had found a way in. The next week, a Zark leader's ship would not start. The engines were fine. The wires were strong. But every time they tried to launch, a voice played over the speakers. It was a human child saying, "Don't forget Juno." The crew left the ship that same day. Zark traders lost millions in failed deals. Supply boxes were sent to wrong planets. Navigation stars were changed, making maps useless. The Zark Empire, which had once controlled so much, started to stumble. And Earth had not fired a single public shot. People across the galaxy began to notice. On neutral planets, whispers grew louder. Other species who had once feared Earth now watched them with new eyes. Some wondered who was doing all of this. Some cheered in secret. Others kept quiet, hoping the storm would not touch them. On Halora 7, where the 10 had been taken, flowers began to appear on empty streets. Some were real, some were painted. All carried notes that said, "We did not forget." The colony's leaders never said who placed them, but the people knew. They knew the small revenge had reached even here. A boy named Cal, who had once seen Bryn Luthar sing in the square, sat by a painted flower and whispered, "They remember you." Some people say revenge is loud, that it must come with fire and screams. But this revenge was not like that. It was soft. It was patient. It was made of care and love and memory. And that kind of revenge lasts longer. It does not fade. It grows stronger in silence. The Zark tried to track the ones behind the attacks. They searched records. They hired spies. They asked other species for help, but they found nothing. Every trail ended in silence. Every clue led to an empty file. They were chasing ghosts. And ghosts don't bleed. Some Zark commanders began to grow angry. They shouted at their crews. They ordered more guards. They punished people for speaking out. But none of it worked. The more they tried to fight it, the more things slipped from their hands. One day, a Zark ship entered a calm zone. It was a patrol ship with a crew of 10. They were checking signals when all their screens turned off. The ship stopped moving. A soft voice played from the walls. "This is for Tomas Gray. He told good stories. Now we tell his." Then the ship's engines came back. The lights turned on. But no one on that crew ever forgot the voice. They never spoke of it in public, but they whispered it to each other in the dark. "This is for Tomas Gray." The small revenge was not a war. It was not loud or fast. It was careful. It was made by those who had lost someone. And when love fuels action, even the smallest steps can shake empires. The Zark Empire had taken 10 people, but Earth had sent back 1,000 echoes, and each one carried a name. At first, the enemy believed it was all just bad luck. A few systems went dark, a few ships vanished. They blamed mistakes or weather. But then one of their top leaders looked closer. He didn't laugh like the others. He studied the reports from the last few weeks. Something didn't add up. The same kind of ships were going missing. The same stations were going silent. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. It was a plan. He checked again. Every event was quiet, no fights, no damage. But the losses were real. He felt a strange fear in his chest. The humans were not acting like prey. They were hunting. They were careful, patient, and smart. No screams, no noise, just slow, quiet payback. And the leader realized something no one else did. The humans were not scared. They were getting ready. Back on Earth, something important was happening. But it wasn't on the news. It wasn't shared on screens or told to the people. The lights in the big cities stayed on. The children still went to school. Stores stayed open and life looked normal from the outside. But deep below the surface, in rooms made of thick steel and quiet walls, the real work had started. There were no reporters, no flags, and no loud speeches. Instead, there were people, calm, serious, and focused. These were not regular people. They were the ones who knew how to build, how to protect, and how to fight without being seen. They were soldiers, scientists, spies, and leaders who had lost something or someone when the enemy attacked. Each person in that room had a reason to be there. Some had lost friends, others had lost family. One woman had once been a teacher. Her brother was one of the 10 humans taken by the enemy. He never came home. Now she was part of a special team, not to talk, not to cry, but to plan. She studied energy signals. She knew how the enemy moved their ships. Her job was to find their weak spots. Beside her was a man who once worked on deep space travel. He had designed quiet engines that didn't make much sound. Now he used his skills to help humans sneak through enemy space without being found. He had lost his daughter in the first attack. No one ever saw her again, but her photo sat beside his work screen. It gave him a reason to keep going. The room was full of quiet minds and steady hands. They did not yell or panic. They spoke in short, clear words. One group worked on codes. Another looked at star maps. A third group tracked the enemy's money. They checked every signal, every shipment, and every message that moved between planets. If a wire hummed in the dark, they wanted to know why. They studied how food moved from farms to ships, how water was cleaned, and how parts for space engines were made. These things did not seem important to others, but to the planners on Earth they were everything. If they could stop one part, maybe the rest would fall. But they didn't want fast revenge. They wanted smart revenge. Hurting the enemy once would not be enough. Earth had been hurt too deeply for that, so the plan had to be more than just a hit. It had to be a lesson, one that would last forever. They knew the enemy was strong, proud, and used to winning, so the humans had to be quiet, careful, and clear. This was not a fight of fire, it was a fight of minds. Each day the humans met again. They updated charts. They tested small moves. They watched what happened when a tiny drone passed through space near an enemy border. They studied how long it took for the enemy to notice. Then they sent another. This time it carried a camera. They learned where the ships were, how they docked, and when they took off. They made notes of when supply ships left with food and when fuel tanks were full or empty. It took weeks, then months, but the picture started to form. The enemy looked strong on the outside, but there were cracks. Small cracks, hidden cracks, but cracks just the same. Some humans were sent into space to live near the enemy. They didn't wear uniforms. They looked like traders or workers, but they listened. They watched. They learned who the enemy trusted and who they feared. One woman who once worked in a repair bay on Mars now lived inside an enemy station. She fixed engines by day, but at night she sent messages back to Earth. She told the planners how the officers spoke, what they worried about, and when they slept. Her notes became maps, and her maps became part of the plan. Back on Earth, some leaders wanted to act fast. They were angry. They wanted to send a message right away, but the head of the secret group shook his head. "We only get one chance to do this right," he said. "We must not miss." His name was General Harlan. He was old but sharp. He had served in many wars, but this one was different. It was not fought with tanks or loud weapons. It was fought with brains, silence, and patience. He had lost his only son when the enemy made their first move. That pain had not left him. It had only turned into purpose. The plan had many parts. One part was to make the enemy doubt their own systems. If lights blinked at the wrong time or doors opened by themselves, they would think someone inside was helping humans. Another part was to stop their supplies quietly. Food would go missing, power would drop, tools would stop working. Not everywhere, but just enough to cause fear. Another part was money. Earth had its own traders, and some of them worked with the enemy. But now, those traders would follow a new set of rules. They would change prices. They would delay shipments. They would pull out of deals without warning. The enemy would not know why. They would think someone inside their own world was betraying them. But the most secret part of the plan was the bride. While everyone looked at maps and tools, a small team worked on something strange. A woman had been chosen. She was trained in many things: language, history, fighting, and charm. She was not loud or proud, but she was dangerous in a way no one could see. The enemy often sent brides to leaders of other worlds to make peace. They used marriage as a way to control others. But this time Earth would send someone back, not to love, not to marry, but to win from the inside. Her name was Rhea. She had grown up on a farm, but she was not simple. She had studied art, music, and battle moves. She knew how to dance in a ballroom and how to survive in a jungle. She had lost her parents in the first wave of enemy attacks. She had no one left. That made her perfect. She had nothing to lose and everything to give. Rhea trained for months. She learned the enemy's ways. She studied their words and how they made deals. She learned how they treated women from Earth like prizes or tools. That would be their mistake. They would not see her as a threat. The planners didn't tell many people about Rhea. Even most of the team didn't know her name. She was part of the deepest part of the plan. Only General Harlan and two others knew where she would go. Her job was not just to spy. It was to change the mind of the Empire from the inside. She would be sent as a bride, but she would act as a weapon. Her eyes would see everything. Her voice would reach the right ears. And when the time came, she would strike, not with a gun, but with a choice that no enemy could block. As the months passed, the pieces moved slowly. The plan grew larger and more detailed. Earth didn't build giant fleets or loud bombs. They built paths, messages, and tricks. They moved like shadows. One station would go dark, but no one would hear it fall. One factory would close, but no alarm would ring. And while all this happened, the enemy kept pretending nothing was wrong. They were proud. They believed Earth was weak. But inside, they were starting to feel the cracks. Leaders argued behind doors. Supplies ran short, and people began to whisper. The humans stayed quiet. They watched. They waited. They remembered the 10 who were taken. They remembered the families who cried. They remembered the names that were never spoken again. And that pain became strength. That silence became a storm. But the storm had not hit yet. It was still building. It was still hidden. It was still coming. No one outside those quiet rooms knew the full plan. Not even Earth's own public leaders. That was the point. If fewer people knew, fewer mistakes could be made. The plan had to be perfect. It had to reach deep into the enemy's heart. It had to show the galaxy that Earth did not forget, that Earth did not break, that Earth did not bow. The planners looked at each step, each risk, and each reward. If one part failed, the others had to carry the weight. They did not want war, but they were ready for it. They did not want revenge, but they would not ignore the pain. They wanted justice, and they would earn it with patience, skill, and courage. The plan was no longer just a plan, it was a promise. A quiet promise made in deep rooms far from light and noise. A promise that Earth would not be silent again. A promise that even the smallest planet can become the strongest force when it is something worth fighting for. The plan was ready. The long hours, the quiet meetings, the secret maps, they all led to this moment. Earth was done waiting. It was time to move. But there would be no grand speech, no lights, no parades. The first wave of attacks would be silent, smart, and sharp. The enemy would not even know it had begun. High above Earth, a group of small ships floated in space. They were quiet. They looked like old cargo ships, the kind that moved food or fuel. But inside, they held special teams trained for this very mission. These were not loud soldiers with heavy weapons. These were experts. Some were engineers, some were pilots. Others were skilled in shutting down systems without a single blast. They wore simple suits and used tools that made no sound. They didn't come to fight battles. They came to take control. Their first targets were the outposts, small stations the enemy used to watch space. These places weren't full of troops. They were run by a few guards and many machines, but they were important. From these outposts, the enemy could watch Earth skis, listen to messages, and track ships. If humans could take these places, even for a short time, the enemy would be blind. One ship approached the first outpost like a trader asking for help. The humans aboard acted calm. They asked for parts. They smiled. The enemy guards allowed them to dock, but as soon as the airlock opened, everything changed. The humans used tiny devices to shut down the outpost's power. The lights went off. The guards fell asleep, hit by silent waves that caused no pain but stopped their brains from thinking. In less than 5 minutes, the outpost belonged to Earth. But the humans didn't stay. They took what they needed, maps, data, files, and left before the enemy woke up. They didn't destroy anything. They didn't cause fire or noise. They just left a message on the screen. We were here. We are watching. At the second outpost, something different happened. The humans used fake codes to get inside. These codes made the enemy think they were friends. Once inside, the humans sent new commands into the system. Doors locked, communications stopped, cameras shut down. One by one, the systems failed. The enemy guards tried to call for help, but no signal left the station. The humans had cut the cords cleanly and completely. Again, the humans left no mess. They left only questions. Back on Earth, the planners watched everything. They had eyes in the sky, on screens, and even in enemy space. Each time a mission finished, the data came back. Each success made the plan stronger. The enemy didn't know what was happening yet. They thought the failures were random. They blamed power cuts, broken wires, or lazy workers. But it wasn't random. And soon they would see the pattern. Meanwhile, more missions began. This time, the humans didn't just go after outposts. They went after supply ships. These ships moved food, tools, and parts between enemy worlds. They were the lifeline of the Empire. If the humans could touch these lines, they could make the Empire weak from the inside. On one supply route, a team of humans placed small machines called sleepers. These machines didn't do anything right away. They just waited. But when the time was right, they would turn on and stop the engines. No damage, no fire, just a sudden stop in deep space. One ship after another was marked. The enemy didn't notice. But soon some ships started arriving late. Some never arrived at all. Traders complained. Leaders asked questions. The Empire had no answers. Back on the stations, strange things kept happening. Doors opened without reason. Lights blinked. Maps changed. Schedules vanished. Food went missing. Tools didn't work. The workers grew nervous. They whispered about ghosts. Some believed someone inside was working against them. Others thought machines were broken. But no one guessed the truth. Earth was already there. One mission took place on a moon base. This base was small but had a big job. It powered part of the enemy's defense field. If that field failed, their whole space line would be open. A small team of humans reached the moon by hiding in old mining ships. They dressed like workers and moved slowly, one step at a time. They didn't rush. For 5 days they lived among the enemy. They helped with jobs. They kept quiet. They learned every hallway, every door code, every system. On the 6th night they made their move. One woman stayed by the power lines. One man climbed into the control room. 2 others handled the alarm system. At the same second they all acted. Power dropped. Lights blinked. The defense shield cracked just for a moment, but that moment was enough. Earth had learned how to break the line. Then just as fast the humans vanished. The enemy never saw their faces. They found no clues, but they knew something had changed. Every mission followed the same rules. Don't be loud. Don't stay too long. Don't kill unless you must, and always leave a mark. The mark didn't mean a symbol or a flag. It meant a feeling, a thought, a fear. The idea that Earth was near and could not be stopped. As more attacks happened, the enemy leaders began to argue. Some said it was just bad luck. Others believed they were being tested by their own people. A few guessed that Earth was behind it, but no one had proof, and no one wanted to admit they were losing. The pride of the empire kept them blind. In the cities of the enemy, things changed too. Shops didn't have the right goods. Water didn't run as clean. People stood in lines waiting for food that never came. Screens didn't show the right news. Sometimes they showed nothing at all. People whispered in homes and dark streets. They asked questions. They wanted answers. The leaders said everything was fine, but no one believed them. And Earth stayed quiet. No statements, no shows of power, only silence. The humans didn't brag, they didn't show off. They moved like wind, strong, quiet, and sure. One of the most important missions took place on a giant shipyard. This was where the Empire built its biggest ships, ships that could crush small planets. Earth had to stop these ships from being made, but they couldn't blow up the yard. That would start a war, so they used another method. A team was sent with special tools that could break machines without making noise. One by one, they touched the engines, the wires, the fuel tanks. They didn't break them completely. They just changed them enough so that when the ships flew, they would fail. Months later, when those ships were tested, 3 crashed. One spun out of control. Another flew backward. The Empire blamed bad design. They fired workers. They rewrote plans. But the real reason was clear to Earth. The ships had been touched by silent hands. Each win was small. A ship here, a station there, a signal lost, a code changed. But together they made the enemy weaker. And as the Empire became more confused, Earth became more ready. In one bold move, a human team turned off an entire planet's communications for 1 hour. Just 1 hour. But in that time, the Empire lost deals, orders, and control. 1 hour was all it took for traders to panic and workers to riot. 1 hour showed how fragile the Empire really was. Still, the humans didn't strike all at once. That was not the plan. The plan was to keep the pressure steady, never too much, never too little, like a stream of water breaking a wall, slow and strong. The enemy tried to fix things. They sent teams. They hired spies. But every time they thought they had control again, something new broke. Something else failed. Earth was always one step ahead. The quiet attacks continued across space. Sometimes a ship would change its ID in flight. Other times a map would lead an enemy fleet in the wrong direction. Fuel would go missing. Files would change. The enemy started to question their own systems. They didn't trust their computers. They didn't trust their workers. They didn't even trust each other. The fear grew like a storm, but it was a silent storm. No thunder, no lightning, just pressure, fear, and doubt. And still the humans spoke no words. They made no threats. They simply acted. By the end of the third month, over 40 enemy outposts had been touched. 10 large ships were broken before they could fly. 7 trade deals were ruined. 5 defense fields had failed, just for minutes, but enough. Earth had not lost a single team. Not one human had been caught. Not one move had failed. The enemy still didn't know how deep the plan went. They didn't know about Rhea. They didn't know about the final phase. They only knew that something was happening, something they could not stop. And that was just the beginning. The enemy thought they had finally found a way to stop the humans. After months of strange failures, missing ships, and broken systems, they decided to fight back. They believed the humans had made a mistake. They thought they could catch them if they set a trap. The leaders of the empire gathered in a grand hall filled with metal walls and blinking lights. They were tired, worried, and angry. Many of their ships were damaged, their supplies were weak, and their pride was hurt. But they still believed in their power. A plan was made. They would wait for the humans to attack again, but this time they would be ready. They would send out the strongest ships with the fastest pilots. They would use the latest weapons and the best spies. They would lie in wait like hunters, ready to catch the prey. They believed the humans would try to take another outpost or stop another ship, so they prepared a trap. The trap was simple but clever. They would send a fake convoy full of valuable supplies. It would look like an easy target. The humans would not resist. When the humans came close, the trap would spring. Hidden ships would surround the convoy. Powerful weapons would fire. The humans would be caught in the open with no place to run. It was a perfect plan, or so they thought. The fake convoy left the main base. It moved slowly through space, sending out signals that told the enemy it was full of fuel, food, and weapons. They wanted the humans to know it was there. They wanted the humans to attack. On Earth, the secret planners watched the convoy. They saw the signals and watched its path. They knew the trap was ready. The humans did not rush. They waited. They studied. They sent small drones to watch the convoy from a distance. The drones were tiny and hard to see. They moved like shadows across the stars. They watched the convoy's every move. The humans wanted to be sure. They wanted to avoid the trap. But something strange happened. The convoy made a mistake. A small ship broke formation. It moved too close to an outpost the humans had already taken. The humans watched and decided this was the moment. They sent a team to attack the convoy. The trap was about to begin. The enemy ships were ready. They hid behind asteroids and in dark parts of space. When the humans came closer, the hidden ships appeared. They surrounded the convoy. Weapons turned on. The enemy smiled, thinking their trap was working. But the humans were ready. They had not come alone. They brought their own hidden ships, small, fast, and quiet. They had planned for this moment. The humans did not try to fight the enemy head-on. Instead, they used their technology to confuse the enemy ships. Lights blinked in strange patterns. Sounds came from places where no ships were. The enemy was confused. They fired weapons at shadows and empty space. In the confusion, the humans moved quickly. They sent out special machines that could stop engines without causing explosions. One by one, the enemy ships lost power. They drifted in space like empty shells. The humans took control of the convoy and the trap. The enemy leaders were shocked. Their perfect plan had failed. They did not understand how the humans had won. They blamed bad luck and poor timing, but they were also afraid. This was the first time the humans had fought back so strongly. They saw that the humans were not just patient. They were smart and powerful. While the battle was happening in space, other parts of the Empire were breaking too. On one planet, workers stopped making weapons. They did not fight or run. They just refused to work. They said they were tired of war and pain. The leaders sent soldiers to force them, but the soldiers did not fight back. They joined the workers. The Empire's control was slipping. On another world, messages were scrambled. Leaders could not speak to their fleets. Orders were lost. Ships flew in the wrong directions or did not move at all. Confusion spread like fire. The Empire was falling apart from inside. Back on Earth, the leaders watched these changes with quiet hope. They did not celebrate. They knew the fight was not over, but they saw the enemy was weaker. They saw cracks growing bigger, and they knew their trap had worked. The humans did not stop their attacks after the battle in space. They kept moving carefully. They took control of supply lines, communication networks, and outposts. Each victory was quiet but strong. The enemy could not stop them. They could only watch and wait. The leader of the enemy was angry and scared. He sat alone in his room, staring at the stars. He had ruled for many years and thought nothing could break his empire. But now, everything was changing. His ships were lost, his people were confused, and his power was slipping away. He knew the humans were coming for him, but he did not know when or how. The trap was the enemy's last hope. It had failed. Now they had no choice but to prepare for a final battle. But the humans were ready too. They had learned the enemy's tricks and weaknesses. They had trained their teams to move quietly and strike fast. They were not afraid. The humans knew this fight was about more than just winning a battle. It was about showing the galaxy that Earth would not be broken. They wanted peace, but they would fight if they had to. They wanted respect, but they would take it by strength and courage. As the stars shone over the empty space where the trap had failed, the humans prepared for what was next. They knew their strongest fight was still ahead, but they were not afraid. They had something the enemy did not: patience, hope, and the power to never give up.